1993 terrorist glorified, burial site decorated. Who wanted to glorify the butcher of 1993? Republic accesses whistleblowers letter to Mumbai police in 2019. Stunning details of corruption on the show tonight. And Republic exposes the Mahavikas Aghadi Yakub family letter with Republic. Details in a few minutes. Bengal's biggest news channel, Republic Bangla, with another mega exclusive on the Sharuda scam, was accused forced to name Shubhendu. Alright, welcome to this special broadcast from Kartavya Path in New Delhi, and a breaking news development just to start the bulletin, and that's ahead of Prime Minister Modi's possible meeting with President Xi Jinping of China on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, which happens on September 15th and 16th. An important development has taken place in the India-China Ladakh standoff, and that's that on the 8th of September, this is coming through sources in the Ministry of Defense, according to consensus reached in the 16th round of India-China Corps Commander level meeting, the Indian and Chinese troops in the area of Gogra Hot Springs, which is Petrol Point 15, have begun to disengage in a coordinated and planned way, which is conducive to the peace and tranquility in the border areas. Now, this is an important development. Remember, since the stand-up started in April 2022, in April 2020, there were 3 or 4 points where the Chinese were not pulling back. We saw them pulling back from finger areas north of Pangong. So we saw them pulling back from Petrol Point 17, and now the Gogra Hot Springs, Petrol Point 15. From there also, Indian and Chinese troops have finally disengaged. This perhaps creates atmospherics ahead of a possible meeting between the two leaders in Samarkand, Uzbekistan, where the SCO summit is taking place. And now we come back to our coverage of the most important event here in Delhi tonight. And that's going to be the unveiling of the Central Vista Avenue, redone and renamed as Kartavya Path. This is where we stand. This is where Rajpath stood earlier, and now it's called Kartavya Path. And in the picture there, see the statue of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose in the trademark salute. And that's what's going to be dedicated to the nation by Prime Minister Narendra Modi when he arrives here at 7 p.m. It's a big day. Big day for followers of Netaji, supporters of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. In many ways, it's a big day in the overall project of correcting certain wrongs of history. We have seen Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurating that Statue of Unity in Kevadia Colony in Gujarat, 182-meter tallest statue of Sardar Patel or anyone in the world. And today, in the heart of Delhi, now see, for the unveiling the statue, it has been covered. But let's go back to an interview that Republic got of an important person, and that's the daughter of Lieutenant General Iwaichi Fujiwara, who was a Japanese soldier who, along with Netaji, or assisted him in fact in setting up the INA.
My first question to you is regarding that your great-grandfather helped Subhash Chandra Bose form the mighty INA. What would you like to tell us about your great-grandfather's contribution and the relationship between him and Bose?
Yes, my grandfather, Iwaichi Fujiwara, yes, he was the leader of one special operation named F-Kikan. And of course, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was a great leader of the independence movement and INA. But actually, the start point of INA, at that time he was still in Germany. So, and it started not in India, of course, out of India, in southeast East Asia, and my grandfather started some Efukikan operation to cooperate with some Indian people and to fight with the British imperialism. So that was what he did, and at that time he was still quite young. Probably he was just a lieutenant colonel or something, and so. But anyhow, he did his best to find a way to achieve the independence of India, not only India actually. What he dreamt of was the independence and freedom of the many Asian countries which were suffering from the imperialism, Western imperialism. So for that, he tried to find a way to cooperate with the Asian people. And so that was the start point of, as far as I know, it was the start point of the establishment of the INA. And at least at first, it went quite smoothly. And they could establish INA, and they could invite Subhash Chandra Bose as a leader of that. So, but this is the basic relationship of my grandfather Iwaichi Fujiwara and INA and Netaji, Subhash Chandra Bose.
So you're telling me that your great-grandfather, along with Netaji, had plans for India and to help them, free them from the clutches of imperialism. So if you could, share some story or an anecdote that you might know of between the two, that how did they transpire or how did the operation take place?
Actually, my knowledge is quite limited, and especially as a personal relationship between Netaji and my grandfather, I have to say I don't know so much. But so it's a bit, it might be a bit out of point, but anyhow, my grandfather had made so many friends with INA's people. So, and his position was kind of military intelligence. And so, interestingly, my grandfather even could not speak English, almost no English, of course no Hindi, no Bengali. Still, and his idea of military intelligence is so limited. Actually, Japanese army had not so good idea of that area. And especially he himself didn't have much idea. But so what he did was simply establish and develop the trust and friendship of many people. So quite a unique type of human he was actually. And so when he, after the war, he was once he gets in the jail of the Changi. He was caught by British, and at the time he was asked by the British officers, why do you think you could succeed in so cooperating with many Indian people, and you could establish INA? And so at that time he said, I simply made a trust and friendship with him, and this kind of thing he said. But at the time the British officer said, it was quite difficult for us, and actually they couldn't simply sit on the floor and have food with fingers. That kind of simple thing, even that kind of simple things was a bit difficult for many British people. But at least for my grandfather, he quite naturally could share that kind of behavior. Yes, and then they could develop and deepen a good relationship. So this was a good point, I think. So I'm not sure how difficult how complicated operation he conveyed. But so what he did was rather simple one. He tried to develop trust, friendship with many Indian people. But of course, we can never simply glorify what he did. Absolutely. Yes, because he and many Japanese believed that they could fought to the British imperialism. But we have to know, and we have to admit, of course, Japan also had kind of imperialism actually. So it's very difficult to say good and bad about the history. And I know, of course, what he did was based on the kind of national interest of Japan. But what I can be proud of is at least his friendship with many Indian people was quite sincere one, true one. That's why even after the war, he had so many friends in this country. Colonel Lidon, or I can remember famous prince in Pakistan. Anyhow, so many friends are here. And he often visited this country, and some of them visited him in Japan. So this is, as to this point, I don't like to glorify what Japan, what he did simply. Still, I can be proud of that point. Yes. Thank you.
So you were talking about this intelligence organization where he was leading. So if you could tell us how did they operate and how did it help Netaji as well?
Yes, F Kikan, first it's better to make a small expression, F Kikan. F is initial for freedom, yes, freedom, friendship and Fujiwara. And it was at first quite a small operation. And probably it started from Japan. In Japan also, there are some independent fighters from India, and they tried to find a way to develop Indian independence as soon as possible. So Japanese military officers found the possibility to collaborate with them. And my grandfather joined that kind of realm, and he went to first probably Bangkok. I don't know, to some places he shifted. And he started collaborating with rather young independent fighters. So probably at first they could not really expect to have Netaji as a leader. It's a too large operation. Still, while collaborating and making the INA, actually, even without Netaji, they could start the INA itself. So then, the large, difficult scheme to invite Netaji as a leader of INA, it started to have the possibility, real possibility. So, in this way, from a small operation, they slowly, actually not slowly, in some limited time, but one by one, they developed, and they finally could have Netaji as their leader. But everything didn't go so well. Yes, probably as you know, at first, quite young officer, Mo Hanshin, was a leader of INA, but there was some difficulty, and Mo Hanshin had to leave the INA. So all these difficult things happened, and of course this operation grew so large. So my grandfather left the operation, and that position was taken by some higher position person. So as far as I know, after that, especially after that point, the operation had more difficulties. But anyhow, in this way, some Japanese and many Indian people collaborated and worked for your country, I think.
My last question to you: how did you find yourself coming back to India? How do you connect from here, from the Indian history? And if you could tell us about your research over here.
Yes, actually, I'm a scholar of religious, comparative study of religions, but in my case, I don't specify any specific religion. Of course, Hinduism, I have much interest in Hinduism, or in some cases Islam, or many other religions. But in my case, my main topic is so-called Orientalism problem by Edward Said. Ordinarily, it is said the Western people had a kind of stereotyped negative image to Asia, and they divide the world, good Western world, poor Eastern world, and they developed their own identity and world idea. This is quite an important point, but in the case of India, the situation is much complex because I have much interest, for example, in the late 18th century, when, for example, William Jones started the study of India, they rather found the similarity or sympathy and to Indian culture, and they really admired Indian, especially old cultures. So they were not simply negative image; they rather had a quite positive image to India, but still, we can simply glorify this. That kind of admire to India was quite good for them to develop the good image of themselves. This kind of distortion was there. So seeing that, we feel how difficult to make a good relationship with other culture, other people. But I don't like to simply criticize them. Rather, we can learn from them how we can avoid that kind of distortion of others, how we can make a good friendship, good relationship with each other, and how we can learn from each other. So this kind of topic is the basis of my idea, and I have much interest in how, for example, British people and Indian people made a cultural relationship, and how they changed their idea of so-called religion or culture or society. And so, for example, I have much interest in, of course, Swami Vivekananda. And what's very interesting is some English concept, quite major now, was developed by him before Western people started to using them. Like spirituality is quite famous term, a common term now. But that kind of way of using spirituality, as far as I think, it started from Vivekananda. So it's quite interesting because English concept was elaborated by Indian person in the last few 10 years or so of the 19th century. So in many cases we say now all the academic concepts or academic system are governed by modern Western world, but if we see in detail, we can find some part is elaborated in between of the so-called East and West. And even the Eastern people are part of the modern world, of course. So to find that kind of mixture of the culture, I often come here. And this time I often visit many old Western cemetery in India. It's quite interesting because I don't know why. Actually, I tried to find the reason anyhow. Many Western people built quite unique tomb they never built in their own country at that time. So probably your rich culture of funeral expression gave them quite large impact. And with those impacts, they mixed with some other sources, and they built quite a unique style of the tombstones all over the India. So this time I went to Surat, Kolkata, and beforehand I went to some other places also, and I'm doing kind of the comparative study. This kind of thing I'm doing.
Viewers, we continue to be live and breaking and continue our rolling coverage from the